Hello and welcome back to another tier list video. Yeah, I'm rapid firing out a bunch of them today. So, this time we are going to be ranking the Zelda games. Like my Golden Sun tier list, I'm going to be doing this twice for both vanilla experiences and for randomizers. So, we're just going to go ahead and jump right into it. Starting with Hyrule Warriors, Age of Calamity, it looks like. I have not played it. We're actually going to do all the I have not played first. Next is Cadence of Hyrule, followed by Hyrule Warriors, Link's Awakening, Link's Crossbow Training, which isn't even a Zelda game. Get the hell out of here with that. Oracle of Seasons. I started an Oracle of Seasons playthrough on the Switch NSO subscription semi-recently, but I have not gotten very far through it, so we're just going to leave that there. Phantom Hourglass, Skyward Sword, Spirit Tracks, and Triforce Heroes. Oh, let's not forget Link's Awakening, or let's not forget The Adventure of Link. So that leaves us with a small suite of games that I have played. I have played less Zelda games than there are. Especially because half of the, a third of the ones listed here are remakes. Yay. Alright. So we'll just go from left to right. Breath of the Wild, easy S tier. Breath of the Wild was so good. Breath of the Wild made me quit World of Warcraft for 6 months. Breath of the Wild was a phenomenal, expansive, open-world Zelda that reinvented the Zelda formula, taking us way back to the original Legend of Zelda game. I have very little bad to say about Breath of the Wild. I think enemy variety in Breath of the Wild was lacking. We only had 3 basic types of enemies, 4 world bosses. The dungeons were really, really samey. You can only do shrines so many times before you get... I'm playing Paper Mario music doing a Zelda tier list. This should do. Let me find a long one. Here we go. There we go. That should do. That's better. The dungeons and the shrine mini-dungeons were very, very samey. Especially the Divine Beasts and the bosses. I think Thunderblight and Windblight were probably the 2 most interesting of the 4 blights. I think the last boss was for spectacle as opposed to for performance. In the way of performance, it was kind of a letdown, but in terms of spectacle, it was really cool. I think Breath of the Wild was phenomenal. Hyrule Castle is a dungeon you can tackle any time, and it gets just substantially easier the more skills you have from completing dungeons. Was amazing. Fantastic game. Absolutely would recommend to anybody. A Link to the Past 4 Swords. I'm going to put in C tier. Now I'll tell you why I'm going to put this in C tier, where I'm going to put A Link to the Past in B tier. The A Link to the Past port on the GBA from the SNES version is effectively the exact same. I think there are some teeny tiny mechanical changes by comparison. The GBA version adds voiceover from Ocarina of Time Young Link to Link in A Link to the Past. And that is kind of it. I think the screen crunches down a little bit more, so you have less visualization on the overworld and in rooms and stuff. It's not substantial, but I think if you compare the 2 side by side, it would be noticeable. Now, the reason that it is ranked lower is because there is an optional, really cool dungeon in the A Link to the Past section that is only accessible if you clear 4 swords on the GBA. Now, the problem with 4 swords is that you need a second person with a GBA, with a link cable, with a Link to the Past 4 swords, and a willingness to play through 4 swords to access that optional dungeon. Or you could use a Game Shark and just move the NPC out of the way to access the Palace of the Four Sword in the Dark World. That alone just kind of hurts it, because the optional dungeon is really cool, but being forced to clear the game mode that requires a second person and their willingness is kind of lame. Four Swords Adventures, I'm going to put it in C tier. I personally liked Four Swords Adventures. It's just like Four Swords in the GBA. It is level-based, and it gets more interesting and more fun, I've heard, if you have additional people playing with you. The single-player campaign story mode, though, still pretty cool mechanically. A Link Between Worlds, I'm going to put in B tier with A Link to the Past. I think A Link Between Worlds sort of reinvented the 2D formula while taking us back to a familiar, well-loved version of Hyrule. Was a really, really good decision, and I think it really did favors for the game. I think the game's biggest weakness is that the dungeons can't have a consistent difficulty curve to them, because all of them have to assume you can access them basically whenever you want to, because of how the item system works in the game, which is renting items from Ravio, getting more rupees, and eventually buying the items from Ravio. Using that system, you can theoretically access any dungeon at any time, so the dungeons have a significantly less steep difficulty curve to them. I think that's the weakest point of A Link Between Worlds. We'll do the Minish Cap next. The Minish Cap was a really solid 2D Zelda game. It was alright. I don't really remember much of it to be able to rank it. I just remember that I kind of enjoyed it. I'm actually going to put it in the D tier system just because the Kinstone system, requiring either another player or being required to interact with the system, as well as farm for Kinstones if you don't have them, in order to unlock certain gameplay progression, is a really big stain on it. Because why give you an optional system but make the system mandatory and require you grind for it if you don't have the right Kinstone for like game progression? Next I will do Tears of the Kingdom, and I'm gonna get a lot of heat for this one. Maybe. I'm gonna put Tears of the Kingdom in D. I think Tears of the Kingdom improved on stuff from Breath of the Wild a lot, like enemy variety. I think Tears of the Kingdom's dungeons was substantially better. I think some of the music in Tears of the Kingdom that wasn't reused was better, while some was worse. Otherwise, Tears of the Kingdom just feels like a really big Breath of the Wild expansion that removes some of your old abilities and gives you some new ones, and it made the game feel really stale really quickly. And I think some of the decisions, like with your permanent ability upgrades that they give you, weren't as good as some of the ones in Breath of the Wild. I think Breath of the Wild was the peak in terms of Link's permanent ability upgrades for this new era of Zelda. And because Tears of the Kingdom was a direct sequel with a lot of the same gameplay elements and stuff like that, they had to figure out what they could do with those permanent abilities. And some of them, by comparison, kind of sucked. How are you gonna top like a free battle res if you die in battle? Especially when your attempt is a one-time use shield in the water bubble that gives you wet status, and shoots a beam when you swing your weapon. I mean, the abilities are just... I think the game is a lot weaker overall, especially with its reliance on Zonai devices as opposed to Link's personal toolkit. Weakens Tears of the Kingdom a lot by comparison. I do, however, think the final 2 boss battles in Tears of the Kingdom are substantially better than Breath of the Wild. I really, really liked Demon King Ganondorf. We're going to do Oracle of Ages next, and I'm going to put it in D tier. I don't remember much about Oracle of Ages. I played it as a kid, but it was okay. I mean, it wasn't spectacular, but it wasn't bad, you know what I mean? It was a Game Boy Color 2D Zelda game that released with a sister game in the series. I mean, like, if your expectations going into Ages are, like, really high as a Zelda game, knowing it's sort of half the story, then, I mean, you're going to be disappointed. That's just the way it is. And I feel like Oracle of Seasons is much the same way. Wind Waker is a fantastic Zelda game. I think the changes to HD with the Swift Sail and the Triforce Hunt make it even better. But I think Wind Waker was a phenomenal Zelda game. Wind Waker is a personal favorite of mine. It also aged up really well. Like, if you played Wind Waker on the GameCube right now, you might not even know that it's from 2002. It is really that good. Twilight Princess is next, and I'm going to put it in B tier. I think Twilight Princess overall is weaker than the Wind Waker, but I have a soft spot for Twilight Princess. I think Twilight Princess's art style is amazing, and I really liked the gameplay. I liked the secret skills. I liked the transition between Wolf Link and Hylian Link. I think the dungeons were pretty solid too. A couple of the bosses were stinkers, but I think Twilight Princess for the GameCube, and I guess the Wii, really, really good game. I also really love Link and Midna's dynamic in Twilight Princess. Super wholesome. Love it. Now for the big 4. If there's any Zelda game I'm going to get a lot of heat for, it's going to be this one. I think Ocarina of Time is B tier. It taking the formula established in A Link to the Past and giving it a 3D spin, and its first attempt on it was really, really good. I just think that it being referred to as the best Zelda game of all time, or even the best game of all time, is it's a gross over-exaggeration. I don't think with all the games we've received thus far in the Zelda series, I just do not reasonably think that Ocarina of Time is the peak of Legend of Zelda. Or the peak of gaming, for that matter. It just is not as good. Sorry, guys, but that's just, in my opinion, that's just the facts. Next comes Ocarina of Time 3D, and I'm going to put it on B tier, but I'm going to put it above Ocarina of Time. So, I think Ocarina of Time 3D's biggest faults were that everything got an overhaul in the game, including some aspects of combat and how some dungeons play through and work, but especially the graphical fidelity of the game. But the soundtrack is lifted straight from the N64. I think that's probably one of its weakest points, because while it is a great soundtrack, why not redo the soundtrack too when you redid literally everything else? I think having 2 extra item slots and the iron and hover boots being moved to those item slots are okay decisions. But I think having a few more item slots than we had as well as gyro aiming, kind of trivializes some aspects of Ocarina of Time with the 3D remake. But I think probably the best additions were the Master Quest mode, which was only seen on the GameCube Special Edition disc that came with the Wind Waker, which gave you harder dungeons, or rather, new mechanics and stuff in the dungeons, harder dungeons, less linear dungeons, with new ways to solve them and traverse them. With veteran players in mind, OOT 3D came packaged with Master Quest, but you had to beat Original first. And Master Quest continued/started the gimmick we saw later with Twilight Princess 3D, or with Twilight Princess HD on the Wii U, in that the game world was mirrored. So when you go out of Link's house in Ocarina of Time, at the start of the game, the Deku Tree will be down. If you're Link looking at the ladder, the Deku Tree will be to the right. In the Master Quest for 3DS, the Deku Tree will be to the left. The whole game world is mirrored, Link is right-handed, and it gives an even fresher spin to those same dungeons you did in the initial playthrough. And then my favorite mode added in this game, Boss Rush. Returning to Link's house at any age and resting in Link's bed will give you access to fight any boss you want at any time with the equipment you would definitely have at that point in the game. And it gives you a boss rush option where you fight every boss in sequence and you pick a chest at the end. Whatever's in the chest, you keep. Boss Rush was a great mode. They should definitely do that in the next Zelda game, whether it's a 2D or a 3D installment. They should definitely do a Boss Rush mode. And now for Majora's Mask. I'm going to put Majora's Mask in A tier with the Wind Waker. I think Majora's Mask was fantastic. I think the bigger emphasis on side quests as opposed to the main story was really good. I think the dungeons were phenomenal. Even Great Bay Temple. I think Great Bay Temple, compared to the Water Temple in Ocarina of Time and Jabu Jabu's Belly, is a massive step up. Stone Tower Temple, one of the best 3D Zelda dungeons in the entire franchise. Even blowing some out of the water from more recent games. Like, I think the top Zelda dungeon in 3D is Stone Tower Temple. I don't think there's a better dungeon in 3D. I think the race transformation masks was an amazing mechanic. The music was really, really good too. And I like the darker atmosphere and themes in general. Bad points, I think if you don't have an interest in the side quests, your only interest is the main story, I think Majora's Mask might not be the game for you, because the main story just does not have a whole lot going for it. The dungeons are great, but that's kind of it. I think another major blow to the game is the 100% reward, or at least for Mask Collection. The 100% Mask Collection reward, the Fierce Deities Mask, has so little. I mean, like, you can beat Majora with it, and then when you return to the game and you have the Fierce Deities Mask in Termina proper, right after that, after the credits end, you can take the Fierce Deities Mask into the dungeon boss rooms and you can make a hilarious mockery of them, and that being a massive endgame reward instead of a major side quest you can go through to earn, that doesn't involve collecting all the masks and then going to the end of the game, would have been a lot better. I think this boasts one of the best and most popular quest lines in all of the Zelda franchise in the Anju and Cafe side quest. I'm not gonna go in detail with the Anju and Cafe side quest. play the game yourself, do the side quest, you will not be disappointed. And the last mark on the series, Majora's Mask 3D. D tier. I think a lot of the charm of Majora's Mask in the transition from N64 to 3DS, I think a lot of the charm was lost with the graphical fidelity update. I still don't like how they just took the same fucking soundtrack from the N64 game and copy-pasted it. I mean, like, I get why, but you're changing everything else. Why keep the music the same? My same complaint with Ocarina of Time 3D. I think the changes to the bosses were kind of lame. I think Georg is probably the only boss that improves, quote-unquote, but every dungeon boss change basically renders the Fierce Deity's mask completely unusable, or nearly completely unusable, against those bosses on a revisit, and that even further hurts even caring about the Fierce Deity's mask for that reason. I think some mechanical changes, such as gyro aiming, both help and hurt the experience. I think the ability to Song of Double Time to any hour of the day honestly is personally a blemish, just because I think the sitting and waiting or finding something else to do to reach those points of the day was part of the experience of the original Majora's Mask, and I think just being, oh, I have an event at 2 in-game and nothing else to do, I'll just, play the Song of Double Time and go right to, 1 and just wait 20 seconds. I think that really hurts the experience. I think Majora's Mask 3D is a much weaker game than the original Majora's Mask overall. Sorry, I had a minor interruption for a couple of seconds. So... Bloop, 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 since there is no E or F tier. So that is my Zelda game tier list. I know I'm probably going to get a lot of hate for some of my decisions here. But that's just what I think. Leave your thoughts, suggestions, comments, concerns in the comments down below, and I will see you in the next tier list. You guys have a good one.